this beautiful self-reflective tool that allows you to kind of connect with your higher self and get guidance on how to work through things and move forward. And I cannot tell you how often self-care comes up when I work with clients. It's just not, I think it's more mainstream now than it used to, but I still think a lot of people struggle with choosing themselves and taking care of themselves. And so what I teach is, it doesn't really matter how you do it, when you do it, it's so long as you do it. So I think sometimes we think, oh, it has to be early morning. If it's not early morning, then I'm doing it wrong. And it's like, no, it could be mid-morning, it could be afternoon, it could be evening. It's just taking that time for you to really just unwind or self-reflect or do something that you love that you don't get a chance to do during the day, because as a single parent, it's all about your kids, right? So it's just finding the time that works for you. And sometimes it starts with 10 minutes a day.
Welcome to Single Parent Success Stories, a podcast designed to inspire single parents. Here you'll find resources from self-care to finances to parenting and everything in between. Discover what it takes to thrive. Let the stories inspire you to what is possible. Hello and welcome to Single Parent Success Stories. Today we have a special guest, Sarah Tai, joining us from California. She's a single mom of one daughter. She's an intuitive tarot reader, spiritual channel, and also the founder of Spirit Journey Collective. Welcome, Sarah. It is a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. It's going to be interesting. I have not had a chance to share my story, and I'm grateful for the platform.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So please share with us, how did you become a single parent?
Yeah, so like many, I didn't obviously plan it. I didn't look for it. It wasn't at all something that I ever dreamed would happen to me. But unfortunately, my husband, my ex-husband, had started, he had an addiction, and I didn't realize it till much later, but he had a drug addiction. And because of that, his temper was getting worse and worse and worse. So my personal background is I have a father who's an abusive alcoholic. So when I started seeing the same behavior in my husband, my ex-husband at the time, it was not only alarming, but as a new parent, my daughter was about 1 year old at the time, I knew that I couldn't let her grow up in the same environment that I had grown up in. I knew that something needed to change. I didn't want her to ever be afraid for her, safety. I didn't want her to see mommy and daddy fighting. And these fights were getting worse and worse to the point where neighbors of our apartment complex were calling the police because they would hear the arguments. That's how bad they were getting. And so it was actually, and I didn't want to leave. I tried counseling. I tried all these different ways to try and hold our family together. But one of the last times, one of the neighbors had called the police, and they came in just to, make sure things were okay. They told me that if we didn't, things didn't get better, they were going to have to get CPS involved, Child Protective Services. And that terrified me. I didn't want anything to do with that. That was really for me the point where I knew I had to leave. And it wasn't just, that there was also it was starting to become a safety concern even for me. And so while he never laid hands on me, he would yell, he would put holes in the wall, he'd get in my face. He was in my face with a knife once. I mean, it was accelerating to the point where it wasn't safe for me or my daughter anymore. And so I actually had to get really strategic. I couldn't tell him I was planning on leaving. I didn't know how he was going to handle that. So it started off with me literally, and I was a stay-at-home parent. So I don't know if you're familiar with Mary Kay Cosmetics. So I was selling that, but I wasn't making enough to sustain anything for me and my daughter. And so it wasn't really a true job. Mostly I was just a housewife. And at the time I was planning on leaving, I think we had like $2 in our bank account. So no money, no job, nowhere to go. My mom would have taken me in, but she lived in the Senior Plus community center. So my daughter and I weren't welcome there. And so I knew I needed to get out. it started literally with me going on my Facebook page to just my friends list and messaging people individually, sharing what's going on and saying, can we stay with you? Because I need to get out. And, you know, it was scary to do that. There was a part of me that was very part of abuse. There's a shame piece that comes to that. And so part of that was also being shameful of asking for help, of even being in this situation. But my desire to get me and my daughter out of it was so much stronger that I just did what I needed to do. And so a good friend of mine, a good childhood friend of mine said, oh my gosh, yes, you can come and stay on my couch. And so one day, I had to plan it strategically. I had to get my daughter someplace safe. I had to have the police on standby just in case things didn't go well. And I packed a couple bags, a couple suitcases, took my car, took my daughter, and I left the entire apartment. I mean, there's furniture and keepsakes and clothes and things that I had to leave behind, and I never got back because of the way that I had to leave. So I took a couple suitcases, my car, and my daughter. And I will say, especially for those in domestic violence situations, the hardest thing to do is leave. That's the scariest, hardest thing, because that's literally when everything officially changes. You know, you can plan to leave, you can think about leaving, but the moment you do, it's real. It's not just something that you're thinking about anymore. And so the moment I left, the moment I went to my friend's house and she thankfully and gracefully let me sleep with my daughter on her couch for 2 months, that was the beginning of, oh my gosh, everything in my world has just been turned upside down. And again, I didn't have a job. I didn't have money coming in. I now was dealing with court. I had to file for a restraining order. I had to figure out custody and childcare. It's another thing. In order to work, you have to have a place to put your child. And I obviously couldn't afford childcare. So it became this blind walk of faith where I didn't know what was going to happen, if it was going to be okay. But I had enough faith to just keep walking and doing just the baby steps. So I went down to the welfare offices, and I was able to get food stamps. I was able to they put me on something for daycare, but it was going to take a month. So, I had time to kill, but I was still looking for a job. I was still, they had another category in the welfare system where they were like, hey, we'll help you get a job. And so, I'm so, so grateful for all those resources, because I would not have survived without them, especially because at 2 months in, my friend, she didn't have an issue with me being there. She had a roommate, and her roommate by month 2 was like, yeah, they got to go. And so again, I was kind of back to, oh my gosh, what do I do? But thanks to being plugged into the welfare system, they had hotel vouchers. And so I had another 2 months using those hotel vouchers. And again, this was all just me trying to get back on my feet, trying to get to a place where I could support myself and support my daughter and just get us someplace safe. And so that's kind of just the beginning of my story. It was domestic violence. I had to get out. I had to strategically plan it. And then I left with hardly anything and had to start over. But I've been a single parent now for 7 years. And it's just been a journey going from that and like initial intense time of literally practically being homeless to, the welfare system helped me get into an apartment. They didn't pay for it, but they helped me get into it. And then at that point I did have a job, and I was able to start paying rent and supporting me and my daughter. And from there, it was just a slow climb from there. And so, yeah, it's been a lot. It's been wild. It's been, an adventure that I never sought, I never wanted, but I wouldn't change it for anything because it's helped make me who I am. Again, I didn't want my daughter to have any memories of growing up in a domestic violence household, because I had grown up that way. And I know what it was like to walk on eggshells and hear my parents fight. And I didn't want that for her. So the good news is, in that area, she doesn't she doesn't remember that. And unfortunately, her dad did pass away 5 years ago. So we did, shortly after I left, there was shared custody for a year. And then he lost custody again, just due to him being unstable, not, and he was a good man. It was the drugs and it was the addiction that really, changed him. Because I was with him for almost 4 years before the drugs and he was great. So it was really just that downhill of the addiction. And so he did lose custody. And then a year after that, he passed away. And so I've been a full-time single parent and full-time, worker, supplier, like head of household for 5 years since he's passed, because there hasn't been, well, I guess more 6, because he did lose custody for one of those years, but officially at 5 years, because at that point, once he passed away, there was obviously no chance of him getting custody back or us sharing her at any point. It was just, now it was really all on me. And I had to, again, go from, at the time I was, we did have shared custody. So, she'd go with him for 3 days and I'd have her the rest of the days of the week. And, once he lost custody, then it became, okay, I have her full time. Now I have to readjust my life and figure out how to make this work, and so it's been a journey. And that's kind of I don't know if that's the short version, but that's kind of the the gist of at least the initial experience of starting off as a single parent.
Oh, wow. Wow. But you were brave, to leave, to everything. That was a big decision, and then to execute the decision. And thank God you were able to, and you had that friend that kind of offered you space to go and give you some place, and then the welfare system helped you also finding housing and a job placement, or aided in that. So awesome. What do you think is the most important trait to instill in a child?
I like to focus on really individuality, and really my biggest thing is I don't want to snuff out her light. She is and so, I mean, I know I'm talking about my daughter, but I'm speaking to all kids. I think that this is such an important piece that I think more and more parents are finally learning, because if you look at the generation of parents, individuality 20 years ago wasn't really as important. It was more about conforming, being like everybody else, go to school and do, become a doctor or a lawyer, or, all the big things, there was definitely like a agenda to follow. And, since I've become a parent, the first thing that I noticed about my daughter is she's just got the spirit in her that, I mean, I'm not the only one who sees it. People who see her just are drawn to her. And like, it's so funny because I'm a natural introvert. So I'm good going in and out of places without really having a whole conversation with strangers. But my daughter, like, she's complimenting people left and right. She's like talking to everyone. So I have to like be more extroverted, and because I don't want to snuff that out. She's just got this spirit in her. And so I feel like as a parent, we're entrusted with this beautiful journey of raising these children into adults, but they're also little beings as they are now. They're already a little personality. And so I think one of the most important things that we can do as parents is really foster that individuality, see the thing that makes them them, and then help them find that connection to it. Because the more confident kids can be in themselves, the easier the teen years will be. Hopefully, that's my hope. She's not there yet, but I'm hoping that'll be the case. Because then I want her to feel like she has a sense of self and not lose what she already inherently has.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it was all about conformity, my way or the highway.
Right.
So we never, as children, had an inclination to ask anything different. We knew we were gonna be denied, or we don't want to get in trouble. Now it's like nobody cares about getting into trouble. Let me see how far I can push the boundaries. Smallest thing you've done that had the biggest impact in your life so far?
Smallest thing I've done that has the biggest impact, I would say heal myself, which when you start that healing journey, it looks small. It looks like taking time to journal. It looks like taking time to look at your shadow and your trauma. And, it can come in different forms, but when I first started my healing journey, I don't even think I knew that that's what it was. I think it was just, I was looking for some kind of an anchor or spirituality. And then through that, I learned about self-hypnosis and inner child work and shadow work and all this healing. And so at first it just felt like, okay, I want to do this because, I feel like I need to be doing something. It's kind of funny, but I've been in the past, I had family and friends who used to jokingly tell me that I was a serial monogamist. So I would go from one long-term relationship to the next. And it was after, not quite after my daughter's dad, but shortly, I unfortunately ended up in a couple other abusive, not so great relationships. But about 4 years ago, I finally was like, no, I don't want her being around this dynamic. I want her to be in a safe, healthy household, which means it has to start with me. And so I feel like that was probably, it felt small at the time because it was just, like I said, it was just little daily acts of taking care of myself and looking backwards to see what I needed to heal. And then it turned into so much more. And then in hindsight, it was like the biggest impact I ever could have done because of how much growth I've done since then. I mean, the first thing, at first it was healing myself. And then it was realizing that my parenting style needed to change through that. And, like we were just talking about, the old paradigm was my way or the highway. And there really wasn't a lot of repair when there were fights or arguments. It was like, or you got in trouble, at least in my experience, it was, I didn't get parents coming back and apologizing to me later if they thought they went off the deep end. They probably had that guilt, but I never saw it, And so the thing that I learned as a learning my new parenting style was, I don't want to do that. I want to connect with her. I want her to know that, okay, so mommy's not perfect. I'm human. I think that's such a big thing for kids to learn, because when you're a child, you look at your parents like they know everything. Like they're just amazing people who know all the answers. And in reality, we don't. And so I think making myself more human, reminding her that, what, mommy's learning as much as you are right now, in a different aspect, but I'm learning too. And not only that, but I think that repair piece was really a big game changer too. Was, again, I started with healing myself, but then I was able to, if I was getting after her for something, and let's say I did lose my temper with her, I was, it wasn't always easy, but because of the healing I've already done, I was able to go back to her and sit with her and say, okay, what you did wasn't okay. So we will talk about this. But first, the way that mommy handled herself wasn't okay either. I should not have yelled, I shouldn't have done, whatever it was. And we'd sit and talk about it. And it would be like, no one should speak to you this way. Even me, even your mom, like there's no reason to be yelled at or spoken to this way. And, mommy's going to work on responding better. And, then we would talk about whatever it was that she was doing that wasn't okay. But, I think that, again, that healing piece that started here, it branched out because now I was able to change my parenting style and catch myself. And I mean, I'm not perfect. There's still plenty of times that happens, but now she's at this place where she'll tell me if I'm scaring her, if she doesn't like the way I'm talking to her, or even she'll say, Mom, don't yell at me. You're right. I shouldn't yell at you, but you need to listen. You know what I mean? Like, we'll talk because she's the sassiest little thing ever. But, it's learning those boundaries of, I don't like the way you're talking to me. I don't like the way that feels good. And she doesn't do it just when I'm disciplining her in general. It's always when I go overboard, and she knows it and I know it. And now there's a conversation to be had. So I would say that, yeah, the smallest thing I did was heal myself, but it's just branched out to being the biggest impact overall.
Yeah, I don't think it's smallest when you say healing.
It felt small in the beginning because I didn't know what I was doing. It was just those baby steps.
Yeah, you're right. So what is one thing you cannot live without?
What was that?
what is one thing you said you healed yourself and you do all these amazing things for yourself? So what is one thing you cannot live without in your day-to-day, I don't know, self-care routine, or how you keep yourself going?
I will say that is hard as a single parent, is carving out that time. Back then I think I had a little, like, now I felt like, because I have my business and I have my podcast, like now I'm trying to refit it in. So I'm at that position of my life where I'm like, ooh, I really need that self-care. But when I started the healing journey, those first 2 to 3 years, I had a pretty good structure in place. So, it was a lot of the times it was after my daughter went to bed. And so part of my healing journey was finding my spirituality. And the first thing that came to me when I signed up for this workshop to do some inner child healing, and I didn't know what it was. I just knew I wanted to do it, and it was rooted in science, but I knew it was rooted in something more. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. Out of the blue, one day I got this download, or this, messaging that said, if you want to do this work, don't keep alcohol in the house, which is so random. And I was like, it was not on my radar at all. It was not like I was an alcoholic, but I think a lot of single parents can relate to this idea of, oh my God, it's been a day, my daughter's asleep or my child's asleep, I need to unwind, I'm gonna have a glass of wine. And that was really it for me. It was like that glass of wine was my way of like decompressing. And so when I heard this random messaging out of the blue that was like, you want to do this healing work, you want to do this workshop, don't keep alcohol in the house. And I didn't know what to make of that, because I didn't realize at the time that that was my intuition and that was my higher self speaking through me. I just was kind of appalled at, like, what is that? But I listened. I mean, it took a little trial and error. I tried to find some loopholes. I tried to figure out, like, because I didn't understand why I needed to remove it. But once I did, I finally made that space. So after my daughter would go to bed, that would be when I would journal. That would be when I do those hypnosis. It was like, like a tape you'd listen to, kind of a thing, where you play it and then you go to deep hypnosis and then you journal what happened afterwards. That was also right around that time I was looking for my purpose, and I felt a calling into doing my profession now, which is tarot. And so again, it was like I carved out, after my daughter went to bed was really the only time that I had. I'm not a morning person. I'm still working on that, but I'm not a morning person. So, mornings are hectic and crazy. I'm sure other single parents can relate to that. So for me, it was once my daughter was in bed, that was my time. And so, it would vary. Sometimes I would, dance, turn on some music and dance, or I would journal, or I would write poetry, or, kind of like get my feelings out. Recently I discovered making jewelry, and that's been really therapeutic, to just sit and work with my hands and just kind of let my mind just kind of drift and kind of release. So, I mean, there's different ways that you can do that. But for me, it was when my daughter went to bed, and it was carving out that time.
Yeah, totally. I can relate to that. But I wasn't a morning person either, but I decided that I needed to have more energy. So I would wake up even earlier before my kids were up to kind of set time away. So that then when they are awake, I'm already ready. I have the energy. I feel like I did everything I wanted to go, then to be more present, kind of to be more, that I didn't feel like I missed something.
Yeah, I tried that. And sometimes I felt that, but for the most part, I've just learned I am not a morning person. And it doesn't help that my daughter would even though she had her own room for a lot of this, I mean, she still preferred to sleep in my bed. So there was still that co-parent, that co-sleeping thing going on, which made it hard for me to like wake up before her and sneak out of the room to, so there was that aspect too. The times I would be like, okay, I'm going to sneak out, I'm going to do my, and she'd wake up and the TV would be blaring, and I suddenly wouldn't have that time anymore, so that also didn't help. So yeah, I just learned, I'm like, I'm not a morning person. It's okay. So long as you squeeze it in. And that's something I've learned.
Yeah.
the tarot reader as a, because most people think of tarot and they think like fortune telling, and that's not what I do. In fact, most readers who read tarot don't see it that way. It's actually this beautiful self-reflective tool that allows you to kind of connect with your higher self and get guidance on how to work through things and move forward. And I cannot tell you how often self-care comes up when I work with clients. It's just not, I think it's more mainstream now than it used to, but I still think a lot of people struggle with choosing themselves and taking care of themselves. And so what I teach is, it doesn't really matter how you do it, when you do it, it's so long as you do it. So I think sometimes we think, oh, it has to be early morning. If it's not early morning, then I'm doing it wrong. And it's like, no, it could be mid-morning, it could be afternoon, it could be evening. It's just taking that time for you to really just unwind or self-reflect or do something that you love that you don't get a chance to do during the day, because as a single parent, it's all about your kids, right? So it's just finding the time that works for you. And sometimes it starts with 10 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be an hour or 2 hours.
That's right. Totally agree with you. It doesn't matter how you start, or just as long as you carve out the time to do something that you love, that you didn't miss out. That's the most important thing. What is your superpower if you had to pick one?
I'm thinking about the parenting realm. I would say probably my self-awareness, because it's been because of my self-awareness that I've been able to see the things in myself that's needed to change, or see an environment and go, oh, this isn't a good environment, I need to get out, and this isn't good. And so, self-awareness is usually the first step. If you're not aware of it, you're not going to change it, right? So before you can change it, you need to know that something's not right. And so, especially as a single parent, I think, first I had the self-awareness of I need to get out initially when I left. And then unfortunately I've been in other not so great abusive relationships where, again, it was like, no, this is not what I want. This is not good for her. Something's got to change. And then once we were, stable in my own place, and I was like, actually, like, okay, I'm really stable, I'm good. That's when the self-awareness turned more to myself, and I was able to really kind of hone in on my own parenting style. And I was able to see when I'd overreact, and see when I needed to reel it in, or see when I needed to go and repair. And I think that that's kind of been a theme that, like I said, even now, like there are times where I catch myself now. It's so funny when you talk about inner child work. I definitely have an inner child in me that still almost throws tantrums sometimes when my daughter, like when I'm gentler on my daughter, when she gets in trouble, there's a little version of me that's like, well, we didn't get treated that way. We didn't get that kind of, gentleness. We got spanked, or we got this, or we got that, and so I find this like anger, almost injustice that comes up in me. And if I wasn't so aware of that, that could turn into me going overboard and not repairing and not catching myself, because that's how a lot of parents were. It's not like they were purposely trying to be horrible people. It was just they had their own traumas from their own childhood that was probably coming up for them that they weren't aware of. So it was turned into projection. And so I think that that's been my superpower, is I've been really able to, when I sense something, it doesn't always happen right away, but usually within the first few minutes of either in the middle of it or just after, I'm able to be like, okay, that wasn't good. And now I can kind of see where and why that came from. And now I have to go and make amends or whatever. So I would say that self-awareness is probably my biggest superpower.
Totally. Yeah. It takes a while, Heiko, to first recognize that something is not working. And sometimes we go through life, we never even ask, we just go through the motions because everybody else is doing that. So I'm going to do the same thing. And we never actually sit down and think, like, where is my life going? Is this what I want to create? Is this how I want to live? We never actually ask, unless some kind of a tragedy happens, like in your situation, you had to leave your home. And it wasn't like you were expecting it. It kind of happened because it just happened. And then how you unwind yourself from that and find your kind of a new way of living and being. So cool superpower to have.
And I didn't think about it. That's the coolest part about it. It's just, I think it's the difference between sleepwalking, which is kind of what you were just describing, when you're just going through the motions, but you're not really understanding that you have the power to change your life. And I am grateful for, before I left my marriage, I was, like I said, I was a Mary Kay. And I think that that was a game changer for me too, because it was sales. So it was kind of like you had to be, it wasn't, every day was not the same. It was all about like, how can I get more leads? How can I get in front of more people? How can I reach these goals? So it really brought me into the present. And that's kind of when I learned my first superpower, which was self-awareness ultimately, but I didn't know that that's what it was yet. And if something wasn't working, I was really good at being like, oh no, I gotta do something different. So instead of getting stuck in the, oh, this isn't working, I'm gonna give up, it was, I gotta do it a different way. And even my sales director at the time was like, you're really good at problem solving. You're really good at, if something doesn't work, you go from a different angle, you try a different thing. And I think that that ultimately was my self-awareness kind of like showing up for me. And, that sense of perseverance, and that kind of led me to the place where I realized, and therapy too. I don't want to also take that out. I was also in therapy before I left my husband. And through the time I left him, like I saw my therapist for a good 5 years, but it was definitely, being in therapy was also helping me understand that, yeah, I think it was Mary Kay and therapy, like both of those together helped me understand that I didn't have to be stuck here, that this wasn't something that I didn't have any control over, that I could choose to leave, and I could choose to leave with $2 in my bank account, with a couple suitcases, a car, my car, and my daughter. Like I didn't, I think a lot of people who are stuck in those situations literally feel powerless. Like I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have nothing I can do. And that's not true. It's really about making the decision, and then starting the journey and making the baby steps. And the hardest part, like I said earlier, is leaving. But once you leave, everything will fall into place. Not right away, and not, but in hindsight, I was able to follow the breadcrumbs that led me to where I am now. So yeah, I would say that the self-awareness kind of started with Mary Kay. And then, I didn't know that's what it was, but that idea of something's not working, I need to shift it, or I need to change it. And now it's more, it just doesn't come in as a catastrophe anymore. It comes in a little more gentler when I'm like, oh, something's got to change.
Awesome. In your journey, was there any book that inspired you to keep on going?
There's a few. Gosh, I haven't read a book in a while though. I was not prepared for this question. So I would say, I know there was, but it was, it was back when I was like really in the midst of leaving. So I don't really remember the names of them. I know there was one called Why Does He Do That? And that was specifically geared towards understanding abusive men. And that was extremely helpful in like the first year or so when I was really dealing with my ex and understanding where he was coming from. And, but that wasn't like helping me as a single parent. It was helping me with co-parenting. But I will say, I think for me, it was more community that helped me. It was less of the reading. And then in 2020 or 2019, 2020, I discovered podcasting. And so instead of reading, I was like, I do a lot of gig work. So when I'm not running my business as a tarot reader, I am doing like things like DoorDash. So I'm in the car and driving a lot. And so podcasting was kind of the next best place to get all that good information without having to make time to read. So podcasts helped me a lot. I know there were books, but I can't remember them off the top of my head.
No worries, no worries. What advice would you share with single parents who are just stepping onto the journey of single parenting?
Be gentle with yourself first and foremost. And, I think that a lot of it is, especially as a single parent, when you're first starting out, there's a lot of feelings of failure, of, I did something wrong. It depends because, either you chose this or you didn't. I think ultimately no one really chooses it, but, either it was a choice of I'm going to become a single parent because I need to get out, kind of like my situation, or it was their relationship just ended without them prepared for it at all, and they're just become a single parent. So either way, though, there's definitely feelings of like, usually feelings of failure, feelings of guilt, feelings of like things like that. And so I would say the first thing I'd say is be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself, and know that it's going to be okay. It might not feel like it right now. Definitely was there. Let yourself cry. That's another thing. Like, feel your feelings, because sometimes, especially in our society, we're kind of taught crying is weak, but it's not. It's a great way to release and to process all of those feelings that you're getting in the moment. And so, allow yourself to cry, allow yourself to feel, and just take the next best step, no matter how small. Don't get stuck. Let yourself take one baby step at a time. And I would also say that there's also, as I said in the very beginning, it felt like a walk of faith, really knowing and latching on to some kind of a higher power, whatever that is to you. That's also really helpful too, because then you kind of get this sense of trust of, okay, I'm not by myself. There is something else guiding me. And in hindsight, when I was in those first tumultuous few months, I don't know if I necessarily had a spirituality back then. I was more agnostic, but I did have a sense of it's going to be okay, even though I didn't know that for sure, and I was not okay at all. I think there was just this underlying feeling of, if I just keep moving, like something's going to be guiding me. I didn't know what it was, but in hindsight, I think it's like higher power, and it's this sense of you're not alone, and just taking it one day at a time. Sometimes it's 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time. That's okay too. The first couple of weeks were that way for me. It was just, I just had to survive the day. I had to be productive in some way. So that's going to help fix my situation or get it, that foundation I needed. But sometimes it was 1 day, 1 hour, 1 minute. I remember it was like one of the first weeks right after I left, I had to go, I think it was when I was filing for the restraining order, but I had to go to court with my 1-year-old. And I remember standing in line at one of the things to get paperwork, and my daughter had a meltdown. And, I was already at my wit's end. I was just like, I was emotionally distraught. And here I was in line. And then I was like, and every parent knows that feeling of, oh my God, everyone's judging me. And so my daughter's having a meltdown. I'm not sure what to do and how to handle her. I'm on the brink of a breakdown myself, and I actually had people, not only did they actually like let me move up in the line so I could get what I needed to leave quicker. But I had so many people coming up to me saying, it's okay, you're okay. And I don't, they didn't know my situation, you know what I mean? But it was just that sense of, okay, I'm okay. So definitely, just be gentle on yourself and taking it one day at a time.
I think that's very good advice, because we could find ourselves living in a fog of uncertainty, unable to feeling paralyzed to make any decision at all, because we don't know what's coming, and taking kind of one foot in front of the other and making, just like you say, we're gonna survive the day and see what happens next.
Exactly. I would say too, it reminds me a little bit, again, I didn't have any understanding of this back then, but the strength card in the tarot deck, when it's upright, it's very similar to a walk of faith. It's you just latch on to that inner strength that you have, whether, it doesn't matter how much it is. It's just, we all have it. Sometimes, especially when we first start, it doesn't feel like it's there, but it's in there. You just latch on to that strength, whatever strength you have, and you just one baby step forward. When that card is when that card is reversed, it actually speaks to being afraid of making the wrong move. So you don't move, you're afraid. And kind of like what you're saying, you're just like, I don't know what to do, so I'm just not going to move at all. And so I would, and I understand it because I was there. So I know how hard it is to make those baby steps instead of not moving. But the one thing that I've learned, especially with that card as a beautiful analogy, is that it's okay if you make the wrong move so long as you're moving. So let's say you make a wrong step, and I don't even like to say wrong because I don't think there is right or wrong. I think it's just learning experiences. But let's say you make a step that you find, oh, that was not the best move. That's okay. Course correct. Now you know that that particular step wasn't the best one for you. And so now we're going to make it another one that's going to be more aligned. But at least you're moving. And I like to use the analogy of a stream versus a swamp. A stream, it's moving, and a stream has life and it has currency, and there is a future with the stream, right? You could follow it and it's going to probably lead to a bigger, river or something. Versus a swamp is slowly dying and there's no movement, there's no currency, there's nothing. And so it's like in this scenario, even though it's scary, you want to be the stream. You don't want to be the swamp. It's better to make a move than make no move at all.
I love that. And I actually heard another one kind of analogy. When there is 2 points and an airplane is flying out from point A to point B, and sometimes unexpected things could happen during the flight. So they kind of course correct a little bit, 3 degrees to the north, 3 degrees to the... Because if they kept on going straight, they might not have arrived to the destination because there was a change of wind or something like that. And another analogy is, how you say, build the airplane as it flies. So sometimes we want to know what the future holds and what steps to take. And I wish I had that knowledge, like kind of run in the future, see what's working, come back and then make a decision. But you're so right, stream has life in it and swamp does not. Are there any fun projects you're working on that you like to share?
Yeah, it's not really in the parenting realm per se, but I've recently started a podcast that I'm very excited about called Spirit Journey Collective. And so that's been a really unexpected adventure that I've dived into in the last few months. And it's really just taken off. And I really enjoy talking to people. And my podcast is all about hearing people's stories. I love stories, especially of how did you find your mission statement, your purpose? How did you find that? And so I get to talk to people all over the world. And I know we've talked about you being a guest on mine too. So, I just love it. It's just a chance to really connect with people on a different level. And so that's been a fun project. And also with my own personal business. So I am as mentioned before, I'm a tarot reader. I like to also refer to myself as a spiritual guide and channel, because it's people hear tarot and they immediately think they know what it is. And it's often not what they think. It's more, like I said, about self-reflection and guidance and just really reconnecting with your own inner knowing. And so I help people who feel lost, who just need that confirmation and validation that it's going to be okay. And so, that business is a project I've been working on for a couple of years now, but I do have a new offering that I'm going to be launching in the next week or so called the Alignment Project. And so it's taking what would be a typical reading and making it so much more. I've created action steps and journaling prompts for every single card. And so this new project is, we'll do a reading and we'll focus on an area of your life, love, career, purpose, whatever, something that you're struggling with and you need some guidance on. But then after I do the reading, then we're going to come up with a tangible step-by-step plan of, hey, this is what you can do to help you get to the future that you're wanting to create for yourself. And so I'm really excited about that. It's called the Alignment Project. And so that's something that's in the works, but I'm pretty excited about launching it.
That sounds exciting. How did tarot help you?
Oh my gosh. Tarot has been so amazing, especially in my single parenting journey. So I've been reading tarot since high school. So for like 20 years. I didn't do it professionally until about 3 years ago. But it actually was a big help in me leaving my marriage, actually. It was one of the, actually, I will say too, I think that was the turning point for me, because before tarot was kind of entertainment and fun, but when I after I left my marriage, or right when I chose to leave, that reading that I gave myself, that was the first time that I had any inkling that, oh, this isn't entertainment. There's real medicine here. There's real guidance here. And so I remember, I don't know exactly what was going on, but I was definitely in that space of, should I stay or should I go? And it might have been right after the police said that they'd have to get CPS involved. It was definitely, I was at that point where I was like, I don't know what to do. And so it was crazy. I woke up one morning, it was after my husband had already gone to work, and my daughter was asleep, and we were on the second floor apartment of my complex or whatever, and my dogs were going crazy, like barking like crazy at the back door. And I was like, what the heck? And I got up and looked out, and there was the raven sitting right there on my porch, not even phased. And I had a big Springer Spaniel who was like jumping on the door, and he wasn't phased. He just sat there and looked at me. And I was just like, this is strange. And then I saw a couple other ravens kind of flying in the background, but he just sat there and stared at me for maybe 30 seconds. It felt longer, but then he flew away. But it just felt like I looked it up. I was like, what does seeing a raven mean? And a raven, it actually represents, it's really similar to the death card in tarot, which is all about new beginnings. It's about chapters ending and new beginnings and starting over and transformation. And that's what the raven represented. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's relevant considering I'm really torn about whether or not I should leave my marriage, right? I just kind of felt like it was a sign. So I pulled out my tarot deck, and I literally did, should I stay or should I go? And I could not have picked better cards. So there's 78 cards in a deck. Each card has a different meaning. And so the two cards that came as the outcome, if I stayed, I got the Devil card. The Devil card represents being stuck in bad patterns, bad cycles, not growing, not getting things, basically not getting better, stuck on repeat. If I left, I pulled the Death card, which tied directly into seeing that raven that morning. And it was just, and I just knew in that moment, like, okay, I need the new beginnings right now. That's what I need. If I stay, it's not getting better. And it was just like blaringly, like, again, of all the cards, those two were the ones that came up. That was my first like inkling, like, oh, there's something here. And so since then I've used tarot for myself for, just those guidance of big decisions, or, I'm feeling lost. What do I do? What kind of guidance do I need? And that was when I started seeing how consistent tarot was and how relevant it was. Again, out of 78 cards, when I was consistently pulling cards that were like so blaringly like obvious, and not just obvious, but like resonant to what I was going through over and over and over again. That's when I really started realizing that there's something really here. And so it has been a big part. And, especially as a single parent, like there were times I pulled cards on whether or not I was doing it right as a single parent. Like, what do I need to know as a parent? You know what I mean? Like, I definitely use it for that too. It's just a really beautiful self-reflection tool and a way to kind of get away from all the nonsense and just kind of get that laser focus of, oh, that's what I need to know.
That's awesome. I love it. Is there anything I haven't asked that you'd like to share?
I don't think there's anything you haven't asked, but I would just come back to, for those that are in the single parenting world, and I'm still there, I'm fortunate that in the last almost year now, my mom sold her house. And so to save rent, we live in California, which is crazy expensive. To save rent for both of us, we've moved in together. And that has been extremely helpful because now I'm not as alone as I have been. I do have that extra person. I'm so grateful for that. But that's only been for the last few months. Up until the last few months, I was doing it all on my own. And so I know that many of the listeners are probably in that space where they're trying to figure it out all on their own. And so the biggest thing I would just love to come back to is take care of yourself and to make space to do something that you really enjoy or that's self-reflective, that helps you heal. Because I think, especially as a parent, it's all about our kids. So we forget that we're just as important. And I love to use the analogy of self-care, especially with my readings, is when you fly on an airplane and they tell you the safety precautions, and they tell you if the oxygen mask drops, you need to put it on yourself first, and then you're dependent. And as a parent, I think most of the time we would like to take care of our kids first and then us. It's like, but even in an emergency situation, they say, no, get it on you, then get it on your dependent. Because what if you get it on your dependent and you pass out? Then you're useless to them. Or maybe you don't even get it all the way on them and you pass out. It's so important to take care of you, because the more you take care of you, the more quality you show up for your kids. And it's another great analogy is a cup of water, right? If our emotional capacity was a cup of water, if you're empty, you have nothing to give and you're running on fumes, right? But if you're overflowing, your cup is overflowing, then you're okay. But now you're able to show up more stable, more that strong foundation for them. And obviously that's not always easy, but I would just say that, just remember that the best way to impact the world is to start healing yourself first. And not only will it help you show up as a better parent, but it's going to teach your kids also that it's okay to take care of themselves first too.
You are so right. And that's exactly what you did. You healed yourself first. Thank you. If people would like to connect and learn more about you, where would they go?
Yeah. So my business website is spiritjourneycollective.com, all spelled out. I'm also on Instagram under spirit_journey_collective. And I also have my podcast. So that's called Spirit Journey Collective as well. I just kind of put it all under the same umbrella so everyone can find me easily. So my podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And I offer individual readings, email readings. If you're local to me, I do events, things like that. So if you want to follow me or have questions and just want to reach out and say hi, I'm more than welcome to. I'd love to connect and talk and all that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming, sharing your journey, your story, and how you were able to heal yourself as well. It's been a pleasure to have you.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you for letting me share my story.